tell me about your most epic fail.
My first thought was, is the glass piece all right? That was my first thought. I didn't want to check my arm. I checked the ground for the glass egg, and it was still intact after falling on concrete.
Tell me what separates the glasswork that you're doing versus what somebody might find on AliExpress or some of the mass-produced stuff that somebody might find that's being resold on Etsy or something like that.
A couple of things. Some of the times it's funny because I'll go through and just kind of skim what people are doing or what is the market for that. And I think I should have sent the link on this, but there was a sex toy blogger that had mentioned us by name, as well as a couple of other glass making toy artisans that had mentioned the nature of stresses in glass, which is pretty important when you're talking about something you're going to be sticking into your body.
Right. Was that the polarization?
Yeah.
That Dangerous Lily did.
Yeah, Dangerous Lily. That's what it was.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've combed through it, but yeah, Dangerous Lily did the article, and she did a really good job on covering it. Made sure to emphasize that for the most part, these other toys won't have issues, but especially some of them that are more egregious, that are rainbow colored under that polariscope, all that tension is just pulling and pushing and causing that stress to, if you drop your toy the wrong way, it could be an unnecessary point of weakness to where, you know, it could be in a full padded case and all it takes is one nasty shock and the piece falls apart on you at that spot. Even in a protective case, it could, with the right angles coming together or whatnot, it could cause issues there.
You mentioned two things. One was tempering versus annealing. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah. So from what I've understood in terms of, because I've had to do a little bit of research on what these shops do, learn about how they make some of their things, and they'll make these toys in bulk, just one after the other. Just by the time we might have a couple of pieces finished, they might have a crate of these clear glass pieces finished. But how they cool them down is they'll cool them down pretty quickly but safely so that the integrity of the glass still holds, but it doesn't necessarily restructure nice and evenly. Instead, it causes those stresses that you see, which causes a nice bit of surface strength. But at the same time, the moment that you have some of these pieces could be so stressed that you take a glass cutter to it and the whole thing explodes. But annealing is the process of taking the temperature from the piece from its highest annealing points and slowly bringing it down after all those pieces of glass, all that crystalline structure has just sealed up together, bringing it down step by step and to its most critical points for 12 to 24 hours at times until it's cool enough. Once you're at about 200 degrees, yeah, it's like playing hot potato with the pieces out of the kiln at that point, but they're safe to pull out at that point. I could dunk them in water and it's not like they're going to just immediately cause new stresses or blow up. It's just warm.
Yeah.
Simply hot glass.
I mean, I come from a jewelry making background and we kind of use the same things and we talk about tempering and annealing. And I always kind of thought of it as, you know, when you're annealing, you're taking the stresses out of the material. You're realigning all the molecules in such a way that the stresses are removed, and you're to a certain extent you're softening it. In metal, we're softening the material. With tempering, you're creating stresses, but you're creating stresses in order to create strength.
Yeah.
So they're two totally different things, but they have their uses. Like tempered glass is often used for windows and things like that, and they have their uses, but not necessarily. You don't necessarily want them anywhere near your body.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've got a tempered glass desk here right now, and the difference between that and one of the toys that I've got sitting in front of me, if I were to take a glass cutter to my desk, the whole entire thing would shatter into a million pieces. If I were to sit there and throw one of these one of these toys at the ground, it might chip on the outside or break in half. That's the biggest thing that when it comes to these, when they're annealed, is that if they do start hitting other hard objects, they are likely to chip. Not that they're weak, but if it's a harder object, it still can affect even just a little ting. We've had to take a piece that's completely finished and put it back in the kiln and repair it because one piece ran into it when we were finishing it, and that's that. Gotta repair it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Luckily, it is salvageable though, so it's not like the pieces that get damaged are just like, well, we just gotta nip it, throw it in the bucket, and it's just gone.
Frost in the chat is reading my mind. What's the design process with glass toys like? Because as I understand it, you don't use molds, and
no, we do not.
It's something that is completely different from the silicone side. Silicone side, we have our molds and we reproduce things. Every one is exactly the same as the one before it, but you don't use molds. So how does the design process work for you guys?
So the long short of the spiel that I can give you is that we use a lot of what are called both hard forces and soft forces when we work with glass. Hard forces being something like pressing a piece of glass between two chunks of graphite, or soft forces being gathering a chunk of glass up to what's called a gather. Imagine that. To get that size of something like, let's say, the head of a toy, or being able to pull glass for specific components of the toy. The design process is pretty much, as weird as it is to say, it's kind of a motto of the shop. It's a go with the flow kind of thing. So when it comes to just the base of each piece, we kind of just say, this sounds fun. And we work with what we can on the forces that we know and the designs that we play around with. And otherwise, when it comes to stuff like texture or more complex pieces, that's when different kinds of glass come out. That's when after processing, or like not after processing, but like processing after the main piece of glass has been made. So dots of texture are usually laid on the torch individually, very coolly, so that the glass doesn't boil at the ends. What else? We've also got other examples or other things when it comes to design process stuff, like marbles at the end that we can make. If I can get a good little shot of that. Can my camera do the thing?
You might have to hold it right in front of your face.
Come on, I don't want my face. I want this. There we go.
There you go. Okay.
Like implosions or anything like that. It really just depends on what we feel for the material that we work with, or what the color sensitivity, or what the color sensitivity is to change whether we want it or not. But ultimately it goes on a piece by piece basis, because every single toy that we make is truly in its own way unique.
Yeah. Like that one that you were just holding there.
Yeah.
Can we see it? Can you see it? Can you show it?
So let me get this like such. This was actually going to be one of the flops I was going to show, because this one had, let me see if I can find the spot. If I can get the camera to focus on it and not my face. But this piece was meant to be a small unicorn horn wand, essentially, but right about here, I can't seem to get it on the camera because I think it's a small piece and it's really hard for the camera to focus on this. But the color in the middle actually started splitting and cracking on us. And the moment that happened, we consider it a loss, because there's nothing we can do to recover it. Some of these colors, once they start getting overworked, they will actually have issues with that, unfortunately. Not all of them, just some of them. And that one in particular, as beautiful as it is, if it starts doing that, there is no more recovering it. It's just done. Game over.
Gotcha. Now, like on that one in particular, can you tell us, and you don't have to get into anything that is proprietary or anything like that, kind of where you would start with that I guess design process of that one, where you would start and how you would build towards that final product?
So we start with chunks of clear material, just a solid chunk of glass that's about 44 mil wide, anywhere from 44 to 20 something. It depends on the component we're building or what we're trying to make from it, but we do work with some pretty hefty chunks of glass. And we'll take that chunk, we'll color over it and work our color magic. And by that point, we've got, depending on what we want to do with the color, we've got to work the color to get it to where we want it to go, or we have to, from there, layer it over with clear and make our material rod, which ends up usually being anywhere from, I'd say like anywhere from 12 to 16 inches. Sometimes we get bigger chunks depending on, it just depends on how much we start with for the material and how much we layer over it. And then we go from there to make the toy, which could be a wand, it could be a set of butt plugs, it could be Kegel eggs. It just depends on what we want to do with it. It could be a custom order.
Interesting. Okay. Here.
Yes, I do.
And I'm always curious, just what does it take to be a glass flop? And, how hard is it to recover?
So I've got the couple of flops that I have. Some of them are just because they were retired designs that we decided were just not suitable for the shop anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But most times if we have something that's never going to see the shelf because it's a just done goner, it's like the toy that I showed you earlier, where if we try and recover it, it's not going to be recoverable. The color is going to crack up, or for some odd reason, we've had one piece in the past where some of the color that we used on it was highly temperature sensitive to the flame, and anytime we worked on it, the whole entire the piece would just start boil. The part that Anna was working on would start boiling. So temperature sensitivity can definitely be one of those things. Or this has happened to me a couple of times, there was one design that we were working on, and I kid you not, it was the most cursed design because we'd make it, it looked beautiful, and it fell off the punty. And it busted in half. So we had to do something else with it other than what we were doing. Granted, that's one of the nice things is we can have a piece that drops on the ground on us, and if it just falls apart, we've still got a means of recovering and doing something with it, but it's not always possible because sometimes it falls into the two pieces. Sometimes the color on the inside is going to look like literal mud if we redo it, and we're usually that's another flop case. If the color on the inside doesn't react well to being reheated and the piece breaks, we usually just kind of sigh disappointedly and call it on that piece and work on the next one. Some flops some of the things that happen that we can recover, like if there's bubbles toward the surface that are too close to the surface and we're worried about having issues with maybe getting popped open, or just causing a point where it doesn't need to be that close to, because sometimes glass itself has bubbles throughout it. Even our core material will have tiny little bubbles that just hang out in the middle, and we can't really do much about that, but it's not something that'll ruin the safety of the piece. But if it's too close to the surface, we're usually able to pull them out and work with the piece from there.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Now, do you start from, when you're working on designs, do you start from sketches or anything like that?
No, we usually just start from. Anna's really good at what she does when it comes to making some of the designs that she does. Especially, I'm seeing in the chat a question about certain designs or replicas, and I'll get to that one in a moment. But it's definitely, she's learned how to freehand most of her stuff pretty well. occasionally she'll drop a sketch of something she wants me to get to, or a result she wants me to get to finish a piece. But for the most part, it's just pretty much free-handed for everything that we do, unless it's more intricate designs like wrap and rakes or other glass techniques like reticello. Then that involves a whole different set of work. Most of the time, if she's sketching something though, it's to show me me what the result she wants to be and explaining along the way how to get there. So
Deb Sativa had a question, and this is kind of a follow-up from one of the ones I was asking earlier. Are there different types of quality glass for making toys? And the cheap toys, kind of imports, are they of a different quality or different materials?
It's hard to say, because sometimes there's a lot of times, and I know I'm going back to this a lot on the Dangerous Lily blog, but it really was such a good resource. And I would honestly, like, I might give that a retweet later when I think about it. But it's such a good resource because he even mentions a lot of these makers who will sell these pieces will call their pieces Pyrex, which I could get different coefficients of expansion for Pyrex nowadays. And modern Pyrex is a brand name and is more than it is a type of glass. It used to be the Corning Museum or the Corning glass version of borosilicate. Now they've got Pyrex borosilicate, which we could buy and use all day long. At the end of the day, it's still going to be 33 COE glass that's going to work pretty much the same as the glass that we've used for this. We use a different brand, but it's what's more readily available to us. So without having to get it shipped in on a big crate or anything like that, that's the best option to go for. But when it comes to what some of the makers use, they might not be using borosilicate glass. They might be using a softer glass, which there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but I would say that it definitely is going the wrong way with the marketing of it all. When we say we make our pieces from borosilicate glass, we can sit there and show the cases, we can show we can show the glass that we work with. It's all borosilicate. We do everything in according to an annealing schedule and everything else, use color that's compatible with it. Everything's borosilicate and everything has to be compatible. Otherwise, if we somehow wound up with the wrong type of glass color one day, it would be comical, the result of it. Because I think if I remember right, Lila had mentioned that essentially it'll just start swirling off and flying away from the piece that it even tries to go on. Because whereas the borosilicate has little room to grow and shrink, the others might have a lot more because it's almost triple at times the coefficient of expansion. Which I don't know the mathematics behind that, but I imagine the higher coefficient of expansion definitely just never will work on the same level.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Tell me about your most epic fail.
My most epic fail?
Yeah.
Hang on. Please hold.
Okay. Well, while you are doing that, I will let everybody know that next week we have Xenocat Artifacts booked. So next week we will have Erie from Xenocat Artifacts on, and that will be, with any luck, will be at 7:00 on Sunday night. Xenocat Artifacts, Erie will be joining us. So yeah.
Ooh, I'll have to tune in for that one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that one.
So my most epic fail to date.
Okay.
I have to put the asterisk there. Was working on my push for Denver. The last day was really tiring, and I had gotten close to finishing. One of my last pieces was this egg in hand. It's a little snow leopard egg, actually, and it's hard to see the details, but there's the rosettes on there, and there's a layer of clear gray glass over a sparkling center to them. But this piece was on the punty, attached here. I've been getting better with something called cold welding, which is where you or tack welding, where you warm up a piece of glass and you essentially just dab it on so that you don't mess up your design. You don't have to clean it off too much. You can just essentially tap it and it just pops right off. But unfortunately, what had happened is that same property worked against me, as it had went against my hand and just skimmed around onto my arm and bounced onto the floor. Oh. Now, mind you, my first thought, just to let you know how serious the situation was. My first thought was, is the glass piece all right? That was my first thought. I didn't want to check my arm. I checked the ground for the glass egg, and it was still intact after falling on concrete. I'm still blown away that this piece survived. But I went to the convention with an egg-shaped burn mark on my arm that I brandished the whole entire weekend without much choice. So to date, that's my most epic fail.
Did I see a scar?
Not a scar. There is there is a little bit of a burn mark left over here, but for the most part, it's healed up. Like I said, it wasn't too serious, and it's something that I kind of giggle about, because whenever I say I burned myself, people will freak out and go, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Oh yeah, the burns are. They're actually not that bad. They're more superficial than anything at times. The burns that I get are, unless it's a really serious burn, they're fine to work with again within 15 minutes, because the glass is so hot it actually evaporates that surface layer of water and just causes a little bit of damage to the skin. Cooking burns are still the worst. Still the worst, hands down.
Gotcha.